Welcome to The Growth Show with me as your host, Joe Camerato. I am an entrepreneur who created my company, National Business Capital, from literally $0 out of my spare bedroom to over $2 billion in business loans secured for entrepreneurs nationwide. Since 2007, I have seen just about every type of business. I provide money and help entrepreneurs access capital to scale fast, but I also know that it's possible for you, as you scale, to replace yourself, to build systems, processes, and great teams of people that can live on without you so you can actually enjoy your life and your company can still grow. I will not only tell you the peaks and valleys of my story, but I will also bring on world-class entrepreneurs to tell their stories and share their lessons on their growth journeys. Welcome to The Growth Show. All right. Welcome to The Growth Show with me as your host, Joe Camerato. Super excited to have the rock star entrepreneur with me today, Jessica O. Matthews, who's amazing. Excited to hear about her story. And Jessica was also a co-host on my show, my other show, The Fund Tank. So welcome, Jessica. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
My pleasure. And so a little bit about Jessica. Some really cool stuff. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, inventor, social scientist with more than 10 years of demonstrated thought leadership in the future of smart cities, climate resiliency, and improving equitable access to infrastructure resources. Jessica's career started at the age of 19 with her invention of the SOCCKET, an energy-generating soccer ball. Really cool stuff. I want to talk about that. At the age of 22, Jessica founded Uncharted, and the founder and CEO of Uncharted, a sustainable infrastructure company that helps cities reduce the cost of developing smart infrastructure worldwide, which talk about timing for a business like that. Forbes 30 under 30 in 2014, a dual citizen of Nigeria and the United States. Jessica's degree in psychology and economics from Harvard University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Welcome, Jessica. Like really, really great stuff. And I don't have on here, but I think you were the youngest Black woman at the time to raise the most amount in a Series A. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't know if I was the youngest at the time, but when I raised my Series A, I had raised the most that any Black woman had ever raised at that time.
The most, that's what it was. I apologize.
At that time in 2016, that now has been surpassed, thank God, because it wasn't an insane amount, but yeah, it's been a fun ride. And what can I say? I took a degree in psychology and economics and what I like to call a PhD in Google. And I turned an idea for an energy generating soccer ball into a data infrastructure company.
That's unbelievable. And was that the soccer ball? Like when you kicked it, it would generate energy and it would also light up? Is that?
It's not the one that lights up. It's the one that so when you would play with it, when it rolled around, it would actually harness that energy from play, that kinetic energy, and then it would store that power inside of the ball and you can plug things into it. So just like, that's what we called it, the SOCCKET, soccer and socket. You could literally plug things in and you can get like an hour of play would give you about 3 hours of light. And I created it first really because, my why starts with my family in Nigeria. And I wanted to create something that would inspire brilliant people like my own cousins who live in Nigeria, who are trained engineers, to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be, to kind of approach the problems in their community, to approach the problems like with infrastructure, the way they approached playing soccer, the way they approached play, with just kind of excitement and hope and passion. And so I wanted to create something that would connect in that way. And the first prototype was a shake to charge flashlight inside of a hamster ball. So wow. I don't know if people realize sometimes like I like to call myself an innovator. I love the idea of invention. I was telling you earlier that if I had to describe myself, it's, if you can imagine Beyonce and Bill Nye the Science Guy having a love child. I always say love child because it's just, I don't think their parents would be okay with it. And I just prefer the idea of being like this, like love child, this Jon Snow character in the corner.
You're the Beyonce of energy.
Listen, I try. It's hard. It's very, very hard. I was
not
just
easy being famous.
listen, I was literally just talking to my makeup artist. Like, she was going through this whole thing about eyeshadow, and I was like, girl. And she's like, I don't get it. It's so easy. And I was like, no, artificial intelligence is easy. That's what I find. I find AI the way this eyeshadow is literally as difficult as AI. But yeah, no. And so I started there and kind of built it up, ended up actually manufacturing tens of thousands of units and having them distributed in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria especially. And we still distribute the products each time we go and work in different communities where we're helping them with their infrastructure. Because even though we started to realize that the best way to help wasn't just to inspire, but also to provide the local governments and the local communities with the tools that they needed to actually fix their infrastructure, we realized that you never want to forget the kids, because you get this like emperor's new clothes vibe, right? Like the kids will always be the ones to keep everyone honest. And so we created a whole STEM education around it. And yeah, that's how I got started.
That's awesome. And did you grow up in Nigeria?
I grew up actually in upstate New York. I was born in upstate New York, but my dad spends about 60% of his time in Nigeria. He does a lot of his work in Nigeria. And I would say we go back at least once a year. Sometimes with work now it's a little bit difficult, but in the last 2 years, I've been back 4 times.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how did you go, like, work your way, like get into Harvard, and how did that journey, start? And then I really want to understand how you've found your way into this whole energy world.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't one of those people who was like, let me do some research and determine which market I should jump into. Like I said, my family had a need, in Nigeria and places like Nigeria. You can just expect to lose power every single day. And it doesn't matter if you're in the village or in like the most cosmopolitan city, you're losing power every single day, and it's impacting the way you design your entire life. You either are relying on kerosene lamps or diesel generators, and kerosene lamps, literally, I think the WHO said they're like it's basically living with a kerosene lamp. It's like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So, so if you have that and it starts to become your norm and you start to just adjust to that, then each time I was in Nigeria, that was my life as well. And I was just seeing too much of life feel less than, right? And so when I was 17, everything sort of started to click around then. I was in Nigeria for my aunt's wedding. We lost power. We expected to lose power. And they brought in a diesel generator just to keep the festivities going. And the fumes were really bad at that time. So I started to complain. And my cousins said, don't worry, you'll get used to it. And I remembered thinking, get used to what exactly, right? Like, we know this is horrible for the environment. We know this is killing us. And I couldn't believe that the solution was to pretend like there wasn't a problem. And again, all my cousins are like trained industrial, chemical, mechanical engineers, because like hashtag Nigeria, right? Like, but I was just like, so you can't even imagine a public-private partnership or some new innovation that could solve this problem. But I didn't do anything with it at that point. I just remember being kind of struck by that. And then
usually how it starts.
Yeah. And then that following year, basically that was over the summer. Following year is my senior year of high school. And 3 members of my family passed away. And it's like sometimes sometimes families just have those years that just suck. That you're just like, man, and it was one of those years. And so basically we lost my aunt, who was younger than I am now. We lost my grandfather, who was relatively young. He's 72. And we lost my uncle. And it was the aunt, father, and grandfather for my cousins that I was referring to earlier. I mean, it was all on my mom's side. And I think, so you have my mom, I'm seeing my mom, who had already years back dealt with the loss of a child, who's now going through this rough year and feeling stuck because she's in the US, like we're in school. She all of these things are happening. She lost her baby sister, and all of these deaths were things that could have been 100% avoided, if not at least somewhat delayed, if they had the infrastructure that I know is possible, right? Because it's one thing to lose power at a wedding, it's another thing to lose power at the hospital. It's another thing to realize that, like, infrastructurally, there are things that just don't make sense in their environment. Like my aunt, who has severe asthma, and like part of the way she passed was from a severe asthma attack, knowing that across the street from where she lived, because they didn't have a system for picking up trash, there was just a massive mound, a massive like compound building size mound of trash burning.
Oh, geez.
Trash burning. And I remember seeing it, being like, what is this right across the street? And so it was that moment. I remember sitting in like my AP psychology class. It was that moment when I was like, I can't live like this. Like, I cannot pretend like there's no problem. I cannot just take this laying down. I have to do something. And I think it was also recognizing that these members of my family, not only did they just pass away, in my mind, semi-prematurely, but they probably took their last breath thinking the same thing my cousins think. You just got to get used to things. You shouldn't bother assuming or hoping things will change. And so I think at that moment, I was like, I could literally dedicate my entire life to addressing that. It's and like, without knowing it, at the age of 18, I basically told myself that I would dedicate my life to trying to solve this very hairy, very difficult problem, because even just the journey would feel right. And so that from that point, everything just becomes kind of like how you articulate the problem. When I first thought the problem was that, people like my cousins weren't inspired to even try, I came up with an energy generating, soccer ball, energy generating jump rope. When I learned that the issue was a little bit more complicated, then the solution got more complicated. But I didn't back down. I just learned more. I grew more, right? Like, in terms of growth, I had to grow. Are we allowed to curse? I don't know.
Sure, go for it.
There was
about business and entrepreneurship. If you don't curse, you're not making.
Yeah, I curse a lot. The growth had to be insane. Let's just say that. But it was like each time I would do something, I would learn more. I would do something, I would learn more. And it took about a decade of work to realize that it wasn't just about inspiration, though that's part of it. It wasn't just about needing some like cool new infrastructural solutions. Like my team, we created an energy generating speed bump that when you drove over it, it would generate a kilowatt of energy. But even that was cool, but it didn't get there. Once we realized that the thing that in every single disadvantaged community around the world, the thing that's always present is a data problem, that people with whatever resources they have, they're spending most of their time collecting, correcting, sharing this information in some siloed way. And all of this stuff is either resulting in people not having the information they need. And so they're making the wrong decisions. They're spending money in the wrong way. Projects that should take 30 days are taking 3 years. Once you realize that all these things are happening, that like it's actually more about how infrastructure is being developed versus what infrastructure is being developed, that's when we created our Google for government, our Google for infrastructure. And that's when we started to see disadvantaged communities go from having a decade of failed infrastructure, a decade of failing to get any grants, any funding, to after 1 year of using our service, being able to get millions of dollars of funding that they never got before, and being able to develop the infrastructure that the community actually needs.
Wow. And well, two things. One is, when you were 18 and like that, was that in that moment too, was that where you said, hey, I want to go off and be an entrepreneur and figure this out? Like what was that moment?
No, I think I always liked the idea of being an inventor. Like, I remembered watching Rugrats and being like, and seeing Tommy's dad and being like, he is so ridiculous. I would be a much better inventor than him. Like, I remember just looking and being
You're
like,
definitely right there.
I was like, who is this hobo ass man in his freaking robe, just doing God knows what, while like his wife is out here doing everything? I was like, what is happening? He's no, don't like that. I always thought, like, for me first, it was like the idea of being an inventor. I think I went to business school, even though a lot of what I learned more, you learn more out of business school. I went to business school because while in college was when, like, I started the business, right? I first started a company called SOCCKET Inc., where, oh, you want to talk about fucking mistakes, where me and whoever else was in the group, we all had equal equity, because, like, oh my God, we'd be nice and fair, and like everyone was in the group. Yeah. We all had equal equity, no vesting period. I get it. We stalemated for we were stalemated for 6 months, and then I had to dissolve that shit and be like, right, that doesn't make sense. Created Uncharted, at the time was Uncharted Play, but I remembered I only created the company in college because I remembered having like one of the prototypes and going to an event and trying to get partners to scale it. And I went to an event where someone who was very high up in marketing at Coca-Cola was there. And I walked up to him and I was like about to do my whole thing. And he's like, I'm gonna stop you right there. I know who you are. I know what this is. You need to become a business so people can do business with you. And that was when I was like, oh, right. Yeah. So you can't just have an idea. You can't just have a product. If you want your innovation to scale and have the most impact, like, business is a vehicle for impact. Business is a vehicle for scale. And so that's probably when I realized, okay, I need to build a business. And then I went to business school because I was like, wow, I think I went to business school when I was 24. And I literally went because I was like, I'm walking into these rooms and I'm nervous. I'm walking to these rooms and I'm afraid that they're going to say something fancy in business talk, and I'm not going to know what the fuck they're talking about. And they're going to tell. And so I went to business school so that I would have the confidence to walk into any room and say, at a relatively young age, right? So the other way is just to live life, but I had to accelerate it. I wanted to walk out at the age of 26. And if someone says something to me in business, I can be like, you just fucking made that shit up. We didn't learn that at fucking HBS. So I feel like I really became a businesswoman at the age of 26.
Wow. And then did you, and you still kind of had Uncharted going, like, when did you go and raise money for that? And like, when did that really start to, like, how did that all go down? I think you raised money from Magic Johnson, right?
Yeah, Magic Johnson's on my board. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, man, yeah, the fundraising process. So yes, I did the very difficult thing of running my company full-time in New York City and commuting about 8 to 10 hours every week to go to school in person in Boston.
Oh, geez.
And for 2 years, I gained 50 pounds. It was still the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, it was incredibly hard. So the good news was that it trained me, like, nothing after that ever felt too hard, because I was like, I had to do this. But I remember raising, so the first it was like, little like grants, loans, things like that. When we needed to kind of get a little bit more, raised our first round, was like a convertible debt round. And I remember, kind of just like seeing some people reached out because they had seen some press. And I had to kind of do pitches with them. I went on one platform that kind of brought some investors to us. And a lot of it was just kind of networking people who I was aware of just in the world. And I remember like driving to the city to do a pitch for like a $10,000 investment. And then having to drive back with my book in my lap because I had to study for an exam that was the next day.
Wow.
Oh my God. Thank God.
Talk about making it happen though.
It was, the things you could do. Joe, did we talk like the things we could pull off in our 20s? Like barely any
Yes,
sleep. Like barely. Now, if you asked me to do that right now, I'm 35. I'd be like, no, I don't know.
It's so fun. I used to work till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd be back at it at 7 a.m. I'd sneak a workout in it. I don't even know at some point. And yeah, I turned 40 last year, and damn, like I just that level of energy. I mean, I still got a decent amount of energy, and I'm still moving, but the things that I would do in my 20s and early 30s, I mean, damn.
I remember one time I remember about a decade ago, I was like, I worked a 23-hour day. I was still moving. Now I think now it's all about the same energy, but we work smarter, right?
Yeah.
We're thinking about things more holistically. I think we're thinking about things more efficiently. We have teams. But yeah, I raised that, and then graduated from business school I went to business school in 2012, graduated in 2014. I raised the Series A that we were discussing earlier in 2016. So that was 2 years out where, I'm walking around able to say, fuck you, you made that shit up, like a little bit, which is key, and growing. And before I raised that round, I brought our energy generating play product business. I was able to turn that into a 7-figure business with I think it was like a 54% profit margin,
Wow.
like selling energy generating soccer balls, and it was like a mid 7, like almost 8-figure business. I had to do that before I could go and raise money from anyone. I had to show that I could make money.
Yep. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
And so that was that was cool. Yeah. That was cool, and kind of getting it there. And then the fundraise. Yeah. Magic invested, a few funds invested, but we tended to go to individuals more, angel investors who would understand the mission and the vision, and be able to not just see us as like some sort of like some numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, makes sense. And now Uncharted, like just so everyone like kind of understands, when you talk about infrastructure, is that in the US, out of the US, both? Give me like an example of like how you would work with someone and how your business works.
Yeah. So it started as very much international. Once the pandemic hit, we started to go much more deep in the US. We actually are working on some projects still in sub-Saharan Africa as well. Now that the pandemic has allowed us to kind of re-stretch our wings, but we ended up doing a lot of work in the United States. And so the way that we work, we basically created, like I said, a Google for infrastructure. So think about the way you used to write papers or do anything before Google and post Google, or now it's before ChatGPT and post ChatGPT, right? Exactly. Like how much time things took versus post. So when people in a community, whether it's a citizen, we primarily work with governments, but we're now starting to see how we can scale to citizens with all this money that's coming from the federal government. But when you look at a local government, they have X amount of money and they have to figure out how to fix the energy system with the utility, the water, to make sure that they're not overcharging for water, to make sure that it's clean water. They're thinking about infrastructure for clean air. They're thinking about transportation, from the street lights to the parking systems. All of those different things kind of fall into infrastructure. we started with energy, but what we started to find was that they were all interrelated. And so that we have to approach this. Yeah. Like water issues are often energy issues because oftentimes like what's making water expensive is an energy issue in terms of pumping that water to people.
I see.
So it's like, it can be things like that. Sewer and sanitation issues can be energy issues, right? Because like, for example, one community working in their waste transfer station burned down. And they're like, well, what can we do to build something that would actually generate revenue for the community versus something that's going to increase taxes for the community? And we're like, well, why don't you put in its place a waste to energy plant that turns garbage into energy and generates. So what our platform does is basically it centralizes all the information that's in different file folders or in some dude who retired 3 years ago, like his pocket. We go out and we get all the information and we centralize it and put it in one place and fuse it together and make it so that it is searchable. So you don't need to have a dashboard. It's as simple as how you would type in something on Google or ChatGPT. It gives you the information immediately, and that cuts down about half the time and half the cost in any project that they want to do, so that they have that information as they're planning infrastructure projects. And then it also uses that information to basically provide recommendations on what they should be doing, right? So for example, like, you know, the average small town is not going to know about a waste energy plant, but now they have this tool that's saying, hey, based on all these factors, you should consider this project. Here's the ROI on it. And they, you know, New York City, Chicago, LA, they have 100 people on staff to do that. The small town that has 30,000 people, maybe 40,000 people, they don't have anybody to do that. And so that's how they're able to basically use this platform as this like extra tool that helps them do their job. So it's 100% decision support, not making decisions for them, providing that feedback and guidance. And we kind of added in like an Amazon feature in that it's not just helping them organize information and get that information and get recommendations on how to build infrastructure in a more efficient and equitable way. But then when it's time to actually do the work, we provide access to vetted contractors to get the work done. And what we're about to start doing is providing access to vetted financial partners to help finance the work as well, because you can't always get the money from grants. And so we help governments with that. And with all this money now that's coming from the federal government, it's huge, right? Like the communities are getting millions of dollars and they never had all this money before. And they're trying to
figure out, what do I do? Right?
What do I do? If you go to the average
it's community, great. You've got the money, but now it's like, how do I do it? Invest it. And the other thing I think you said was important is, and it's good to hear this, because I feel like, unfortunately, government doesn't look at a lot of things like a business. So they'll do these things that just cost us more money to, like, you know, like the waste thing, like, boom, now you turn it into a revenue center versus a revenue, sucker. Exactly. And it's cool to hear that these things are actually happening, because we need more of this in our country. Because, you know, I look at our government, unfortunately, as like this giant business that like has never taken the time to trim the fat and make things more efficient, and also like focus on, hey, maybe we can make a profit from some of this stuff. So it's cool to hear that you're helping with some of this, because I think it's needed for long-term sustainability for our country and to keep winning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so right now in the United States, we have this once in a generation thing happening. We got trillions of dollars coming out and saying to states, to communities, and they're saying, hey, use this money to fix your infrastructure. So everything we rely on, from our connectivity and Wi-Fi, because there's still like 1 billion people in this country that do not have access to reliable internet. And when there's a pandemic or whatever, you have to go to school online, like they were kind of shit out of luck. To make sure water is clean, people should not be wondering if the water is clean. And we see the things that are happening. We shouldn't have a cold snap, right? And then half the people in Texas don't have energy. Like, this is ridiculous. And so there's ways to fix this. There are new technologies and new solutions, but the people who control the money are not the people who understand the technologies, how to build them, how to select them, how to make sure they work. And so we give them a Google that gives them the stuff that they need to become those people.
That's amazing. That's awesome. It's unbelievable that you basically have created this from nothing. And I truly respect that, and I respect it. I mean, I created my platform at National Business Capital. There was nothing, not a single place where a business owner could apply if they got turned down from a bank. They didn't know where to go. So essentially, you're doing that for governments to navigate, their, energy and infrastructure, and there's not like a place to go, and you created it. And it's not an easy thing to do, to pull all that stuff together. And I'm sure to the databases and the technologies to pull those things together, it must have been, and probably is just a never end tech build. But it's really cool.
The biggest piece of it all was really radically simple yet radically efficient. There were other companies that were trying to do this, but it was, one, crazy expensive, and two, you basically had to be a data scientist or like at least a data analyst to use it. The idea,
and navigate government,
Exactly. And so for us, it was like, you should just be someone who's semi-literate. Like, that should be all you need.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. Well, just because we're coming on top of time here, and I really loved hearing this stuff. What was like the biggest, challenge that you overcame, have had to overcome in your business that wound up being, probably, a big opportunity? And I'm sure at the time didn't feel that way.
I don't know. There's like, I think a lot of times business is really about these kind of mini challenges that you have to just get through, or you're not going to grow, right? Like, I love the title of this show, The Grow Show, because like growth, there's a reason why it's called growing pains, not growing pleasure or whatever the hell. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to, you're supposed to feel it. You're supposed to go, oh, wow, I should not touch the stove again, or good to know. And, and so there were so many little things that had to happen that I had to learn from. But I think the biggest macro thing now, like, as we work with federal governments, and we're using a technology that I did not know anything about when I started my career. Like, if you went to 26-year-old Jess and said, right, so you're going to run an AI-enabled data company that does da-da-da-da-da, I'd be like, fall back and define 7 of those 10 words, right? So I think for me, overarchingly, right, one of the biggest, not so much challenges, but just something that I had to really recognize as I look back, was that it took longer than I expected to find the magic bullet. And in that process, I created a lot of cool technologies, and we scaled and got to different things. But, I'm now talking about 9 figures in revenue for what I do versus, 7. And those numbers are very, very different. And if I was afraid to grow, if I was afraid to pivot, I would be probably, doing good in my maybe 7-figure range. Sometimes it would be lower, sometimes it would be higher, maybe would have sold. But because I was comfortable learning from my customers and listening, and I took ego out of it and said, okay, this is cool, but it's not right there. Right. So what would be the tech that works? What would be the tech that works? I'm now in this position where, I'm getting brought in my Fortune 25 companies to advise them on innovation. I'm getting opportunities to support the actual distribution and development of billions of dollars of funding for infrastructure. And it's because I wasn't afraid of the growing pains or the necessary change that would need to happen in my business and in me to be that kind of leader. And so not so much a challenge as much as like a theme.
No, it's good stuff. And not only is it a challenge that you've continued to overcome, but it's also great advice. And I definitely think it's a great, place to wrap on, and I feel like, listen, if you're not dealing, you're watching the show, sometimes you think business and you hit these glass ceilings, these brick walls, you get knocked down a little bit. I don't think I've ever, if I really look back through all of like my breakthrough moments in business, getting to the next level, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's next level of revenue, next level of profit, next level of hiring of people, of layers of management, whatever it is, all of those things were challenging, frustrating. You felt like, and you feel like, is it me? And I just think it is a part of the growth journey. And if it was just easy, right?
Yeah.
Then everyone would just be growing with no no problem, right? We'd all have billion-dollar companies overnight, and it's not reality. So it's really really well said,
Yeah.
and I think probably really great advice. And you got to deal with some pain in order to grow it. And I think when that's happening, instead of getting frustrated and annoyed about it, be like, oh, this is one of those growth moments, and how can I do this maybe in the most efficient way? Um, and I think pulling in sometimes the right resources and people to help maybe point out things that you're not thinking of. I know that's helped me a lot through my journey.
Oh, yes. We have a whole slate of advisors that have equity in the business that are just critical, because it's not about hiring everybody. At least in the beginning, it's not about hiring everyone, but you want people who are passionate, you want people who are committed, you want people who are nimble, who can then also be advised by people who have 10, 20 years of experience. And I found that was the perfect match to get to this point. Once you're a little bit more stable, firm, you're kind of in a growth phase, you can say, okay, I know for sure I need this person to get me from where I am right now to where I want to be in 2 years. But before that, you
Just gotta make it happen.
you gotta be comfortable with change. You
Yep.
have to be comfortable being nimble. You got to be comfortable making mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I have a story for every single mistake.
No, we all do. And I think my biggest learning and growth have come from the mistakes. So, and if you're not trying, and if you're not getting out of your comfort, like, you have to make mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you are not pushing yourself out of, beyond your limits. And
Exactly.
really,
Exactly.
really good stuff. Well,
Awesome.
listen, I appreciate you being on the show today. I really love hearing your story. Jessica O. Matthews, aka Beyonce and Bill Nye the Science Guy combined. Really good stuff, and I really love what you're doing, and it's awesome that you created it from zero. So much
Awesome.
respect to you, Jessica. And how can people follow you, get in touch with you, find more about your business?
No, so you can find me on Instagram, Jessica O. Matthews, or at Jessomatt, JESSOMATT. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Jessica O. Matthews, and from there you'll see all the links and things to learn more about my company Uncharted, or just more of the work that I'm doing to try to help more people create their own Uncharteds.
Good stuff. Yeah, well, make sure you're hitting up that uncharted territory in order to grow your business, because that's where it's at. Keep doing what you're doing, keep growing, and thanks again for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.